Wake up! Wake up! So, I don't want to talk too much about Orlando, but my thinking right now is, of course, everybody's going through what they're going through, and that's normal, and you have to go through it. But I'm thinking in terms of course, what we talk about here, a magical level of thinking, and my my go-to is always that it's an unpowerful question to ask. Why did this happen? I leave that to the experts that know how to investigate. Why did this happen? I don't want to get involved in a metaphysical why did this happen, because that's not helpful. What's helpful is, how can I help? That's really the best and most powerful way we can ever be in any kind of crisis, whether it's an accident on the side of the freeway, whether somebody's going through a disease, whether somebody's going through a divorce, whether somebody's got problems with their kids, whether somebody's got problems with their health, whether somebody's got problems with their finances. How can I help? And just like when somebody's going through problems with their finances, if it's a systemic problem that they go through, how I can help isn't usually giving them money, but how I can help is seeing them prosperous. I can deny the appearance of their poverty, because I know that on the other side is a very prosperous person that's going to come through. And if I agree with them on a very on a mental level with their problems, I'm not serving them. I'm enabling them, exactly. And that's why I am encouraging people to turn off the coverage, because it doesn't help. No. Knowing what they said and what he did and then what happened and then what happened and then what happened and who showed up and who got killed and who did, all of that stuff is not helping. It's really not helping, because if you're going to watch something, watch the people that showed up at Stonewall. Just spontaneously showed up at Stonewall. That huge crowd that showed up at Stonewall. Listen to the living people and what they have to say about it, rather than the reporters trying to relive the incident over and over again.
Ratings up, as opposed to focusing. Well, then I want to give ratings to the people that talked about what happened at Pride the next day.
But it's not the news' fault. They're giving the people what they want.
Right.
The people love this shit. Mm-hmm. They love this stuff. They love it. Mm-hmm. It makes them so happy to just sit and gawk at the accident and say, "Oh, it's so horrible. It's so horrible. It's so horrible." If it's so horrible, then why are you watching it? Right. So, from a magical point of view, I don't care about those people. I don't care about the 98% of people that are, into watching the televised comfort, and that's fine. And I'm actually not even judging them. I'm talking about us, because when we're thinking, okay, what do I do? How do I help? How can I help? How can I help? Where our energy needs to be focused is on relieving suffering, because that's what our definition of love is. Mm-hmm. And how do you relieve suffering? Well, you can do things in the world, but I'm thinking in terms of what we talk about here, and that's magically. And the only way to relieve suffering magically is to see them healed, to see the people that are gone. They're not suffering. They're fine. The people that are suffering are the victims that are left behind.
And the family members of the deceased.
Which are the victims, Yeah, so the victims, meaning the families and the people that survived. And I consider the families as survivors as well. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones that are suffering. And the only way that we can help them, because unless you know them personally, and unless there's a fund or something that you want to send money to or whatever, that's fine. What we can do is we can really, again, not focus our energy to force a specific outcome, but to see joy where there is pain, to see relief where there is suffering, to see light where there is darkness, to see forgiveness where there's condemnation, to see healing where there is sickness. And this is a diseased mind created this. I refuse to agree with everybody that's into this, that ISIS is evil and this person was evil. That doesn't help us. They're sick. They're diseased. They're not evil. Evil can't exist. It's impossible for evil to exist because there's no principle of evil. There's no principle of darkness. There's no principle of poverty. There's no principle of illness. There is only principle of light. There's principle of health. There's principle of love. So darkness is not necessarily, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's not a real thing in the grand scheme of things, because if it was real, it wouldn't disappear the second a light came on. Right? Your dream isn't real because if it was, it wouldn't disappear as soon as you woke up. You know what I mean? So the nightmare of the terrorists is not that they're evil and they need to be destroyed, because that's just going into it on their level. I mean, that's like they're like, oh, thank you. Now you're finally doing what we want you to do. It's like somebody with a mental illness that there's more than one diagnosable mental illness where it's lethal because ultimately the patient wants to kill themselves. There's another type of mental illness, and some of them coincide, where they are very paranoid of anything that would fix them. Paranoid of the medications, paranoid of the therapy. So it's not that they're evil. Dangerous, yes, maybe. The mentally ill people can be dangerous, especially if they are armed with weapons of war, which don't belong on streets anyway. I don't care how much into guns you are. Come on. That's not what being armed should ever be about. But the fact that we have a mentally ill person who's been undiagnosed and untreated able to go and get weapons of war to kill people at whim is not that person's fault. That's our problem. It's our collective disease that we have to take responsibility for. And even if you are a person that disagrees with me on that, you have to at least agree, politically on that, you have to at least agree that in this particular circumstance, it was a problem. Mm-hmm. This was a problem. It was a problem on every other mass shooting, too. Mm-hmm. So regardless of your views on gun laws, there is a disease in our collective consciousness that allows this to happen. On a global level, on the race consciousness, there's a disease that not only allows these kinds of things to happen, but encourages it. So the good news is that, magically speaking, the light always pierces the darkness. The darkness cannot prevail in the presence of light. Again, it doesn't mean that darkness is bad. It just means that darkness is an absence of something. It's not an isness on its own. It's not an entity to itself. So because of that, light is stronger than darkness because light exists and darkness doesn't. Okay? So therefore, even though 98% of the population is thinking in terms of the disease, they are thinking in terms of what their senses are showing them and telling them that this is bad, this is irreparable, it's only getting worse. We have the opportunity to recognize that if we are thinking in terms of a magical truth, that we are much more potent, just like when you turn on the light. Now, how much light you turn on, definitely, sometimes there's too much light in our world. Sometimes too bright is bad. but for us, I don't think that's an issue. I don't think that's a problem of too much light. So what I wanted to talk about that kind of dovetails with this is that our thinking is skewed when we think in terms of how the mind works, magic. So when we have a we have different functions of the mind. We have the deep mind, which is or subconscious mind, or subjective mind, which is on one level what keeps the heart beating, what keeps the synapses running, that just runs everything. Because can you imagine if you had to think of every little breath and what, did I get enough oxygen in the bloodstream, and oh shoot, do I have to dial up that carbon dioxide? That, you would die. So that's taken care of. That there's a part of your mind that takes care of all of that. And there's a part of your mind that also takes care of behavior. And there's higher functions that are available to that deep mind. I mean, if you play an instrument, you can see if you practice every day, eventually you become good at it, and you don't have to think about where your fingers go on whatever you're playing. If you ever had to learn a speech by heart when you were a child, you probably still remember the speech to this very day, because when you learn something by heart is actually a very old Chaldean expression, which means the deep mind, which means the subjective mind. So when something's done by heart, in that respect, and if you look at any of the biblical references of the heart, whenever in the Old and New Testament they're talking about the heart, they're talking about that. They're talking about the deep mind. So we have that level of mind is the deep mind, and that pretty much covers the bulk of our existence here on Earth, because we are automatic beings, and that's actually not a bad thing, because if we start trying to do things on our own, that's when we get into trouble. So there's a certain level of automatic, which is good. Then we have our conscious mind, which is the one that has a lot of self-importance. But the thing about the conscious mind is it's only capable of, it can't do multitasking. It can't do anything other than this. It's very, it's very limited for good reason, because what it is capable of doing in its true function is making choices. What do I want? What don't I want? So that's what your conscious mind's best at. It wants to do things that it's not supposed to do. It wants to take over the deep mind, but your forebrain, your conscious mind, the you that you think you are, your ego, is capable of making choices. And so as we grow spiritually, we are, hopefully, that's reflected in the choices that we're making. And if we understand magic, if we make a choice, we can shoot that choice into our deep mind and have it done for us automatically. And that's what magic is. Then we have a third part of our mind, which we call the higher self, or the superconscious mind, right? And that superconscious mind is the one that is your best self, your very, very best self, the best you that you could possibly be. Part of that very intimately because you've done wonderful things. Part of it you don't know yet because you just haven't even come to be introduced to your own greatness of who you really are. And that superconscious mind can be invoked, and that's where a lot of superstitious thinking, since it seems so different than who you think you are in your conscious mind, so when something happens wonderfully, and it seems very, very divine, we don't think in terms of, wow, my superconscious mind, my best self, it really is wonderful. We think in terms of, oh, what entity outside of me granted my wish or came in and intervened, right? So all angels, all deities, all Jesuses and saviors and goddesses and all of that stuff, if you really want to get to distilling out where those concepts are helpful, they are personifications of your best self, your higher self. And your higher self is capable of uber genius. Uber genius. More than, even we haven't even seen on this earth yet what we're capable of. So that's the superconscious mind. So we've got those three levels of mind, and there's only one mind. It's not like we're not compartmentalizing it, meaning that there are three separate yous. They're all you. It's just that they're different functions, they're different phases of the mind. And the conscious mind operates in such a way so that it can get, because it needs reality, it needs to know who it is so it doesn't go insane, that it really benefits from the compartmentalizing of it. So that way it doesn't get overwhelmed by thinking, when you say me, do you really mean me? No, we don't mean you in that regard. We don't mean the personality. We mean the greater you that transcends all lifetimes. That knows everything, why you're here, what you're here to learn, what the purpose of the Orlando thing was, what the higher function of that was, because everything has a higher function, whether you want to believe it or not, and you don't try to force that if you're not ready for it. When you're in the midst of grief and despair, you let yourself work through it in whatever way is best for you, as long as you don't get stuck in it. So you don't try to force that on yourself, and you don't try to force it on anybody. Oh, I'm sure it's all for the best. I mean, that's just the worst thing you can tell somebody who's in the middle of crisis. You don't say they're in a better place. You don't say any of that bullshit. You just say, how can I help? Mm-hmm. And even if you have to say that silently, how can I help? And hopefully their superconscious mind tells you, so that maybe they need a hug, maybe they need you to leave them alone, maybe they need you to go to the store for them, maybe they need you to wash their car, maybe they need whatever. And that's what you can do. But again, you're not just doing for someone isolated. You're doing for someone because it is it's an inlet into your superconscious mind. Okay. So when something happens, and it doesn't have to be on this scale, but even something in your own person, and that's another thing about a thing like this. Whenever something happens on a grand scale, whenever it was 9/11 or tsunami, it doesn't matter, natural disaster, terrorist attack, murder, somebody got a disease, whatever it is, when it's just bleh, and you aren't touched by it, it's very difficult not to have survivor's guilt. It's like, well, who am I to worry about my money? Mm-hmm. Who am I to worry about my car problems? Who am I to worry about my, And, my recommendation to you is just notice that, thank it for sharing, and still work on yourself. Because your suffering is not going to help anybody. Your living your life is going to actually help them more. Because you're raising the vibration. You're raising light. And there's no time, there's no space, and there's no distance in the superconscious world. So your ability to have a higher vibration whilst thinking of them hits them much more significantly than all of that television coverage could possibly bring them down. And they won't even know why. And they may not even be conscious of the fact that they've been lifted. But that's what you can do. And it's okay to use whatever means come to you. That means lighting a candle every night. That's a wonderful thing to do. Just go light a candle and it doesn't have to be any big deal, but just light a candle. I'm calling on you can call upon a deity if you want. I've been, especially since I did this last advanced class online, we got rid of a lot of superstitions in that class, and we didn't work with deities. We worked with principles. So I just, but Bridget, to me, she's like a great patron goddess, but I had to put Bridget to the side because we were working with no deities, none of that stuff. We had to strip it all down into pure principles. So I was thinking in terms of, infinite love, infinite joy, infinite life, divine presence, all of those are all gods and goddesses and angels. I mean, that's what that means. They're just principles. They're personifications of principles. And then when you get into the cultural part of all of that, then you get into their, the personalities of the people that were worshiping them. And so then you get to their indigenous ways of worship, which is important to honor. But you have to always recognize that even if you're into that, don't get superstitious about it. Recognize that this is all just a cultural personification of an infinite principle, right? So Anyway, so you could call upon the principle of infinite healing. You could call upon the principle of infinite forgiveness, because they're not ready to forgive this. They're not ready to forgive him. I mean, maybe they are, but most of them shouldn't be. I mean, that's a process. But we are in a place where we're removed from the situation to some point that we can call upon the forgiveness that's necessary. Because until there's forgiveness, there's no healing, and it self-perpetuates. And again, forgiveness does not mean condoning. It does not mean being a doormat. It does not mean stopping behaviors. You can be very forgiving and put someone in prison. You can be very forgiving and kill someone in self-defense. You can be very forgiving and tell somebody, no, I don't ever want to see you again, and get a restraining order. That's fine. But you're not doing it out of malice.
Right.
You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So we are not saying, oh, we forgive them and we hope it all works out. We're saying we forgive them because through that power of forgiveness, we are calling upon divine justice. The more forgiveness we can use, the more power we have to access the principles that can fix this. Does that make sense, kind of? So anyway, so what I was saying before was with your survivor's guilt, let's talk for a minute in terms of how this can be applied to your issues, not just them. So anyways, you can do that for them. You can light a candle, you can do whatever you want. Once a day, it doesn't have to be a 24-hour vigil. Once a day for a week or something like that, just to give them what you need, what they need from you. That's wonderful. And that's a good thing to do. And if you want to go to some of the candlelight vigils that are going on, if you want to go to some of the memorials that are going, there's a lot of great stuff that you can do if you need to mourn and you need to be with people. That's absolutely fine. But the purpose for doing all that stuff is to get into being alive. And part of being alive is the fact that you came in with a set of problems that need solving, and don't use this as a delay tactic on your own stuff. Because that's not honoring their memories. It's not honoring someone's memory to lose your way because it was so awful. Because this is not the last awful thing that's ever going to happen. And I'm not discounting the intensity of cruelty that happened. But had it been an earthquake, people would not have reacted in the same way. You know what I mean? Sure. So it happened. There's no reason why that we can understand. But what we can understand is that our power is immense to assist in the healing and in the healing of not only those people but of everyone on the planet. And the vehicle that's the most powerful to do that is your life.
Right, because if we stagnate in our own personal progress, we're stagnating in the ladder of life.
Right.
Right, because if we just then end up wallowing in the grief or the anger or whatever, then we might just be reaching up on the ladder for someone to pull us up, that's okay.
Which is fine.
But we're not moving.
We're not moving.
Anything,
yeah, you're
so
actually.
The person below me who's maybe even worse off isn't going to get help by me.
Right, and on that ladder, there are times that we step down a few rungs, and that's normal. It's part of it, but hopefully it's one step back, 3 steps forward. But overall, it's got to be progress because you don't have a choice in that. I mean, none of us do. I mean, that's evolution. So, but it gets really, really dicey when you start thinking that my problems aren't important because it's not life or death. And so if you come up against that when you're in the middle of whether it's this or another crisis, do it in honor of them. Remember, bless his heart, the old Southern curse, bless her heart, I taught that to somebody once. She was just like, oh, she's such a bitch. I said, just say bless her heart. And they're like, well, but I don't want to bless her heart. I'm like, no, just say bless her heart. It means the same thing, but it's nicer. Yeah. It's just a nicer way of saying that bitch. But bless his heart, when George W. Bush said, don't You know, if we stop shopping, the terrorists win.
Yeah.
He had a little wisdom in there. There was a little nugget of wisdom in not necessarily that we have to go out and spend money so that the economy doesn't tank, but when these things happen, if we can learn how to honor them by progressing, it's a good thing.
Well, and also I find too, like when you hear about that, like, or someone's in pain or they have a disease, and you're like, oh, well, I shouldn't feel bad about my stubbed toe.
Yeah.
But also people do that to each other. When you say like, oh my gosh, I have so much laundry to do, and the other person says, oh yeah, we'll try having 5 people. It's
Right.
Like, but I
Right.
was just dealing with my laundry.
My stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to a psychotherapist long time ago. I can't remember if they were research. Anyway, they were talking about the fact that they had done a lot of studies on stress levels with people's problems, and they talk about white people problems. You know, like so you've got white people problems, which are like, what am I going to do about my what do I do about my Manolo Blahniks don't match my skirt,
Right.
versus how am I going to feed my kids, right? But what was interesting about the study was the stress levels were no different. They were just as stressed out and deteriorating their bodies on the same level as the people with what we might consider real problems.
Survival issues.
Yeah, real problems.
Yeah.
So and therefore you can't necessarily, I mean, you can judge anybody that you want to, but you can't necessarily understand where somebody's coming from. You can't understand what somebody's lessons are, what their process is, and to think in terms of like, my problems aren't as important because it doesn't involve death. You don't know that that's true. You don't really, that's not really for you to decide. You have to deal with what's in front of you, because your superconscious mind came in with these things. These gifts, these strengths, these weaknesses, these lessons, all of this stuff. And if you start second guessing every little thing about yourself, well, I'm not, who am I because I'm either not good enough or my life isn't sucky enough. I mean, we're never. It's not. That's just a trick we play. On one level, well, I'm not rich enough, and then on the other level, it's like, who am I to worry about stuff when they are poorer than I am. So we're like, well, which is it?
Right.
Do you need to get more money, or do you need to feel guilty about the money that you have? That's ridiculous. No, the truth is,
That's
what
reality.
is in front of you that needs to be handled. So when you're dealing with trying to teach your subconscious mind what you need, which is what we were opening with and what I wanted to talk about. If you start using your conscious mind to think in terms of, well, my needs are not important, the deep mind is going to say, okay. And if you start thinking in terms of, oh, my problems aren't important because I have too much. The deep mind can think, well, let's give you some important problems. Let's not let you have so much. Whatever. So you've got to be aware of these things. In terms of that old saying, compare and despair. If you compare, you will despair, because that's the nature of your deep mind, is to give you what it thinks you're asking for. And when you are asking for something from the deep mind hears requests based on beliefs, what you believe. And what you believe based on what you feel. Your emotions are the barometer of your belief systems. So if you're afraid of something, it's because you're believing in the problem, not the solution. If you're excited about something coming, then it's because you believe or you have faith in something positive coming, rather than in the whatever is leaving or whatever, something else. So your emotions are a barometer of where your faith is. So if you ever want to know what, like we say with the witch's pyramid, faith, imagination, will, and secrecy, and people say, well, I don't know if I have enough faith in this. Well, what do you feel about it?
Right.
What are you feeling about it? Well, I'm feeling very afraid. Okay, well, then you're afraid of the problem. You believe in the problem, not in your spell. That's what that's saying. Well, what do I do about it? Change that. You have to change that. You have to reverse that. Well, I don't think I can do that. Well, then let's take it down a notch. What do you think is possible? That's when we talk about your sphere of influence. So if you're afraid of something coming, and your spell is such that you never get out of that fear, then you're trying to do something too big. You need to bring it down. You need to bring it down into something more manageable. So you're not most of us aren't capable of casting a spell that's going to, make everything better in the world of terrorism and, foreign policy and all of that. I mean, that's a little out of our sphere of influence right now. But that doesn't mean we can't have an influence on it. But how do you do that? You work through your sphere of influence. What do you think is possible? Mm-hmm. Well, if what you think is possible is that, so let's take let's just take health. Say you've got a condition. Say you've got a huge condition and it's causing you a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. And so every time you try to do a healing spell, all it does is seem to exacerbate the fear. Well, what kind of improvement do you think is possible? Do you think you could have more hydration tomorrow? Do you think you could have more water intake tomorrow? Do you think that could make you feel better? Do you think you could do you think it's possible for there to be a switch in your medication that has fewer side effects? Is that a possibility? I mean, there's an endless possibilities of something with
supplements every day.
Yeah, in your own sphere of influence that could actually make a difference. Then, what you'll notice as when you're just a little bit beyond what you think is possible, not way beyond, little bit beyond. Every time you get that, then your sphere of influence moves out, and pretty soon you're capable of probably healing that disease or living with it in a very wonderful way. Finding a way to live with it that where it's not as big of a concern for you. Or whatever you're going for. The same thing, money, relationships, whatever it is. If you start with what you think is possible and go one little step beyond that, then magically what you've done is you've given it a double whammy. On one level, you've blasted your situation with the energy that is going to bring about a result, which is a little bigger than what you thought was possible. And in doing that, you've expanded your sphere of influence. So then the next time you have to do something, you're going to blast it this much bigger. But what people don't realize is that it's exponential. Right. Do you know, I can't remember the actual figures, but the exponential growth of technology since the recorded history, I think it's twice as fast every 10 years or something like that. So think about that.
Yeah, our evolution, I forgot what the number 2, but our evolution stagnates where technological evolution is way beyond our biology.
Well, and you can see that. I mean, so we've got the technology to kill all those people with that weapon, and somebody very sick using it, unevolved person using it. I mean, but there's positive side to that. Think in terms of when we have the anytime I hear somebody talking about climate change. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, by the time our grandchildren are there, they're going to be in disease, and there's going to be worldwide famine, and it'll take at least 250 years before the earth can fix itself. And I said, or there will be an app for that, and they will fix it. You don't know. You don't know that that's true. You just made that up. You don't know that's it. That data is based on technology that's today, but it's growing exponentially faster. They probably will fix that and it won't be that big of a deal. I mean, I'm assuming.
I mean, we're 10 years out from AI.
Yeah.
Which could go either way. But we're 10 years out from it. I mean,
but then they'll fix that too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not worried about the future. I'm really not worried about the future. I think the future is going to be fantastic. So, but that again, the only reason I brought that up is to show you how fast your sphere of influence can expand. So if you don't start out by trying to become a multimillionaire, if you start out by just like, okay, well, how can I pay this month's rent?
Or like, I was thinking about that because I was doing some spell work about finances, and it was like, pay my bills. But then I brought it all the way down into like, this week I can pay my water bill.
Yes, exactly.
And that was so much more possible than like this, all these different utilities and a credit card into just, here's the $43 I need to do that one thing.
Right. So there's that. The sphere of influence expanding. The second thing about talking to your subconscious and your superconscious mind is remember that who you think you are is your conscious mind. That's your ego. That's your who you think you are. That's where your personality lives, and it really is puffed up, and you know it's more into itself than an actor. You know, in Hollywood, talking about his role. And nothing against actors in Hollywood. I mean, I have a lot of good friends, but they will agree that crowd is very, very into themselves, and they have to be. That's part of their profession. But that's very much like how you are and I am, because that's our self-importance is this little teeny bit of our minds, is our conscious minds. A powerful witch or magician is one who recognizes that the conscious mind is only there to make the choice to cast the spell and to hand it over completely and utterly to the deep mind to get it completely accomplished and to forget about it. Just like planting a seed, you don't dig it up. Just like a surgeon, when they take out your appendix, they don't open you back up and say, is it okay? Is it still gone? Is it gone? You don't nag at your subconscious mind and say, when is it happening? When's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? Looking for it. That's murder. Because what that's telling yourself that you have zero faith. Yeah. Right? So
digging the seed up.
It is digging the seed up.
Are you sprouting?
Is it there yet?
That's sprouting.
Right. Yeah, so that's the impatient conscious mind. So what do? You give the conscious mind something else to think about. You involve yourself in very important activities in your life. You go do things that you can lose yourself in, and you're not thinking about that anymore. And that way, it becomes automatic. Now, when you're doing spell work, I recommend that you do it every day, whether it's on the same thing or not. But I recommend that you practice your magic once or twice a day, just like you should practice your instrument every day. Because the more you do it, the more you're training your subconscious mind. And the more you train your subconscious mind, the quicker it can learn new pieces of music. In other words, new events in your life.
Meaning
so
the basics become automatic, and you can keep it.
So if you're right, so if you're playing the piano, it might take you when you're a beginner, like 6 months to do that 2-part invention by Bach, to learn how to do that. But you'll notice that all of that learning made the next piece easier and faster and easier and faster, and pretty soon you're just sight reading all of this stuff, and it's really, really easy. Not really easy, but it's easy by comparison. You're doing things that you never thought would be possible with that. Same thing with magic. If you practice every day, then even though the beginning spells that you're doing might seem like, this is so hard, it's just I can't make this work, just stay with it, don't give up, keep at it, and pretty soon you'll get really good at those instilling those thought patterns into your deep mind, and then you can do it again with this and again with that, and you will always have something to work on. There's always going to be a new thing. There's always going to be the next thing. And somebody was trying to tell me that was negative once, and they said, it's so negative because you think, okay, I want this car, and you get the car, and then 15 minutes later, it's not that big of a deal, you're on to the next thing. I said, yeah, that's good, that's called progress. Mm-hmm. I mean, what are you supposed to do? Just sit there and go, oh my car. No, of course you're grateful for your car, but you got it. So now you want the next thing. And that's fine. It's called progress. You want the next thing. Otherwise, we'd still be, in a horse and buggy.
No one ever has just one thing. Everybody's got a list.
Yeah, and once you get everything on that list, then you have another list.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's fine. It doesn't demean your magic to take it for granted. It's okay to take it for granted. It means it's real. You take it for granted. It's been granted to me, so thank you. That doesn't mean you're not grateful. All right. So I guess my point is that no matter what's going on, there's no excuse not to work on your stuff. No matter what's going on, everybody has 5 minutes to do their daily practice. 5 or 10 minutes is all it takes. All it takes. And you know what to do. You know how to do it. And if you get stuck, just know that even doing nothing more than taking 6 deep breaths and relaxing your mind and body and tuning into that part of you that is your higher self is enough. And sometimes that is the only spell you need. Sometimes rather than really, conjuring up the right image for yourself and conjuring up the right situation, that has its place, and I think you should do that. I mean, goals are good. Sometimes it's good to just let the goal go and just, my superconscious mind knows exactly what's right for me, and I'm just going to bathe in the light of higher wisdom right now and just let everything work out perfectly for me. I'm just going to really let it work out however it wants to. I'm just going to rest and relax and see how it manifests, and it's always really good. It's never like the superconscious mind goes, oh, I think you need more suffering. No, the superconscious mind is always wanting you to learn through joy, learn through pleasure, learn through happiness. And you can ask it. You can ask your subconscious and superconscious mind. Everything is coming to me in an easy and fun way, and my life is enjoyable. And everything works out better than I ever expected and what I ever could have possibly hoped for. And just give it that direction and see what you get, right? And if you notice that you're stuck on a spell loop and it's always the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over, that's time to get rid of those spells. You're not doing that anymore. You're gonna take a break off of that same thing that you're always working on that never seems to be working out for you, and you're just gonna say, heal this, please. Obviously, I'm not doing a good job with this. I want to do something fun, and I want this to be resolved in a wonderful way, in an easy way, in a fun way, and I want it to happen now. And don't take no for an answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's just do a quickie meditation. Quickie ... meditation. We'll relax our body and mind. And bring ourselves back to our sacred circle and our sacred fire. And let's just cast into this fire anything that is unlike perfect love and perfect trust that we are holding right now, regardless of what it is. Let's just cast it and know that burden was never meant for us to carry. And as we release it, we feel more relaxed and more at peace, more powerful, more loving. And thank you very much. Together we all say, blessed be.